Hello and welcome. My name is Janice, and I just want to show you a super easy method that I use to make ocean themed key rings. So to start off, I've got my 3 molds that I've separated or cut off of the main mold just because I like them separate. Found it easier to work with. And before I start using the resin, I just use a bit of sticky tape or sellotape just to clean my molds. So I know that they're dust free. Please don't forget to always wear your gloves. Resin is toxic, and people do have a reaction to the resin at times as well. So I've put my A and my B resin into a container, and I've got to stir for about 3 minutes now. So I'm not going to make you watch that. I'm going to switch the camera off, and I'm back. I've been stirring for about 3 minutes, but as you can see, hopefully there's tons of little bubbles in the resin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some isopropyl alcohol, 99%, which I've decanted into a little spray bottle. Here's the bottle that you buy. You can buy it at any pharmacy. And I'm going to do a quick spray into my little cup. And immediately I can see the bubbles start popping. I've got 2 types of sand. I've got a white and a brown, but I'm going to use the brown today. And I'm going to decant some of it into a little separate container. And I'm going to mix that with some resin. So I'm wanting to get this to become like a honey consistency. And I can see that that is still a little bit too thick. So I'm going to add a little bit more resin. And hopefully that should do it. That looks perfect. So I'm going to add now my sand mixture into the molds in the areas that I want the sand to be. And the consistency of that is kind of perfect. It just flows nicely. It moves a little bit. And I just find that it just really works well. I don't like it being too thick. So I'm just making sure that it's just right up to the edges. And what we want here is we want the sand to be halfway up the mold, not to the top, because we've still got to add more resin. So I see that that's quite thin in some places, so I'm adding a little bit more sand just to get it to that halfway mark. I've got my little seashells, and they're very small. And I'm going to just place those on top of the sand. And all you've really got to make sure here is that your shells are not so big that they stand above the mold. If they do, you're just going to have a real problem when you put your last layer of resin. You're going to have difficulty covering the shells. So make sure that they're just below the rim of the mold. I'm taking a little bit of the clear resin and I'm putting a very thin layer over the shell in the sand. And then I'm decanting some into a separate container. And I'm going to use a little bit of light blue mica powder. And I'm going to stir well, and that's going to go into the mold in the area above the sand. And then I'm going to take a little bit of darker blue mica powder and add that to the resin that I've just used. I'm just adding a bit more resin because I didn't have much left in there. And I'm adding it to just the top and the edges of the mold. And the two colors are going to blend in beautifully together. Now I have leftover resin. I never ever let my resin go to waste. So what I do is I've got this gorgeous little mold that I use for fridge magnets. And with any of my leftover resin, I pour it into that mold. And so I'm adding a little bit of black mica powder to this leftover resin. And I'm going to put it in here. And I will use, when that's set at a later date, I will use some dried flowers and I would make some fridge magnets. I'm just using my blowtorch to get some bubbles out of what I've just done. I leave for a minute or two and I do again. And at this time I can hear a commotion on my roof. Cover and leave overnight. Here is the commotion. I just thought I would add this in for fun. So a troop of local monkeys invaded the property today, which they do every 2 or 3 days. And they make a real racket. They are so cute, but they are quite naughty. But this is our life in South Africa, and I just thought it would be fun to add this in. So we never ever feed them. It's a rainy day today. You can see the rain. We never feed them, but one of them broke into my kitchen, and here's the culprit. So here we are on the next day. The resin has set beautifully. So remember, we're halfway up the mold now, and now we want to put our top layer on. So I've pre-mixed the resin, so you didn't have to go through that. And I'm going to fill each mold so that it's level with the top of the mold. Just pour slowly and try and make sure that you don't go over the edges. And then once again, use your lighter or your blowtorch to get and remove any bubbles. I always wait a minute or two because more rise to the surface, and I do it again. I cover then and I leave overnight. So here we are on the next morning, and they have set beautifully. I love this part. It's just so rewarding. So this was just a previous one that I've done, and I just added a little fringe thing to it and a little starfish charm, and they make stunning gifts. And it's just such a great way to practice your resin, get to know your resin, try a few different techniques. So when I was doing the M, I obviously left a little bit of sand on top of the mold And that, as I put the last layer on, it's joined, but it's not a problem. I will have a little tiny piece of sandpaper and I'll just remove that. But other than that, I'm absolutely happy with them. I love them. Love the way the colors are blended, the sort of the light blue and the dark blue. And I will turn those into key rings. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope it's inspired you a little bit to just give it a shot. It's really not as hard as you may think. And I'll see you in the next video.